alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. I want to introduce you to Brother Ahmed. He grew up in a upper middle class environment, like many of his friends. And when it came to start college, his parents told him that he could go to the local public university. They had saved up enough funds to sponsor his 4-year education. But his career aspirations told him to go to a private university instead. So as many of his friends did, he took out a student loan, and he went and attended. While he was in school, they came and told him that he needed to sign up for a credit card, because it's a smart thing to do. You need to build your credit. You have to buy a house later in life. This is the way everyone does things. So he signs up for a credit card, doesn't think anything about it, smart decision. He graduates, he gets a job. He goes out and gets his own apartment, buys a new car that he wanted, because now he's got the income to do it. A couple of months go by. He's saving a little bit of money, not too much. And he gets married. Alhamdulillah, great news. So now he gets married. Now it's a whole new set of issues and challenges that he's not used to. How do I budget for groceries? Everything's doubled. There's 2 cell phone bills. The electricity bill has gone up. Groceries are insane. Every time I get paid, we go to Bed Bath & Beyond and start buying all these weird things I've never heard of before in my life. I have to buy another car. Expenses start going up. The 1-bedroom apartment's no longer good enough, so he goes and gets a 2-bedroom apartment. A few months go by. Now they're expecting a child. Great news again. So now, instead of Bed Bath & Beyond, they're going to Babies R Us. Cribs, diaper genies, machines to warm the wipes to wipe your baby's butt. All kinds of things he'd never heard about before. Starts buying it up. They go to Rooms to Go. They get that 0% for 72 months. Furnish their house. A few more months go by. They have the kid. They realize that the car is not big enough to hold the stroller and the kid and the groceries. Trades it in, gets a minivan. Now the expenses are going up again. How do I budget for diapers and formula and baby food? More groceries, more bills. Now flying home to visit the parents and the in-laws is a lot more expensive when you got 3 plane tickets instead of 1. Doesn't know what to do, but he's a smart guy. He figures it out. Starts to fall a little bit behind on his credit cards. Doesn't think too much of it. He's a smart guy. He's never been bad with money. So 3-figure debt, not too bad. We'll knock it out. Turns into 4 digits. Okay, something's wrong here. But I'm a Muslim. I don't pay interest. Oh, here's an offer in the mail, 0%. Transfer your balance for 12 months. Signs up for it. Bought myself some breathing space. Continues on and on and on. And after a few years, Ahmed is 30 years old. He's got 2 kids. Between the student loans, the 2 cars, the furniture, the credit cards, on a $70,000 a year salary, he's got $90,000 in debt. And that's not the worst part. The worst part is this outwardly successful lifestyle. While Ahmed is sitting at home knowing in his heart that zakat is not even fard on him because he doesn't have enough in his bank account. More than that, when he steps out of his house to buy milk, eggs, bread, he is doing it on interest because he no longer has the cash. This is the story of many practicing Muslims in our time. Muslims who are attending these weekend classes, praying Fajr and Isha in the masjid, doing all of these religious activities, and yet there's no help or support or education for personal finance. As I started my personal finance journey, trying to learn about these different things, budgeting and practicality and how to save money and save up for your kids, all these different things that you worry about as you go through these different seasons of life, I found that there was no real Islamic advice. I looked at Islamic finance and what I found was, here's a loophole to buy something you can't afford. You want to buy a car? Here's a halal way to buy a car. You want to buy a house? Here's a halal way to buy a house. When I bought my house, I went through an Islamic mortgage company. I also applied at a bank to compare the two. And the Islamic finance company, where Islam served the community, lift people up out of oppression, out of social injustice, they approved me for a loan that would have taken 90% of my monthly income to pay back, because that would have been the greatest profit for them. I wouldn't have been able to buy food, but they would have approved me for that loan. So as I began studying, I found that the greatest solution was actually from an evangelical Christian point of view. Dave Ramsey, some of you may have heard him, he's got a radio show. They have a course that's taught in churches across the country, 16 weeks, financial peace, the goals of which are on the premise that a good Christian never becomes slave to a lender, that they're in a position of prosperity which allows them to help others. And this all of a sudden made sense to me. How to budget your money, how to save up, how to anticipate expenses, how to not live paycheck to paycheck. And it killed me that this information was not available for the Muslim audience. Where were our Muslim speakers and our scholars here to teach us how that when two people get married, how to manage their household, how to make a budget, how to save for expenses? But instead, all that we find is pages upon pages of fatwa on how to get a loophole to buy something you can't afford. And so that's the state of personal finance. I had the chance to meet Dave Ramsey at one of his courses, and I spoke to him briefly for a few minutes. And I asked him what he thought about an Islamic version of what he teaches. And he told me, he goes, I'm surprised no one's done it yet. You should really do it. In fact, you should take my book and replace the Bible verses with Quranic verses, because the Quran is a lot more strict about debt than the Bible. And I said, yeah, you're right, but no one's doing it. And he smiled and he goes, yeah, I know. And that shocked me, is that where is this education for Muslims and where's the discourse? The discourse that we have is all oriented around how to find a halal loophole. Whereas if we take the body of Islamic literature, the goal is to lift people, not subdue them. To be in a position to be able to help others, not being on the receiving end. So we have to change the way that we approach and discuss this issue. One primary example of this is student loans. Now what's become common nowadays is for people to say that student loans are a necessity. That education is a necessity and therefore student loans are a necessity. And we have even fatwa saying that this is a necessity. Interest is now halal for student loans. But the thing is that we haven't addressed the way that we frame the question to begin with. There's a number of assumptions that go into place. Who says that it's an inalienable human right that you have to do college within the first 4 years of graduating high school? Everyone that's been to college went to school with someone that was working full-time and going to school part-time. Where does it say that you have to go to a private university? Who says you can't go to community college and knock out the basics and then go somewhere else? Who says that you have to become a doctor? When did that become a necessity of life that justifies taking student loans? But more than this, is that the discourse and leadership says that student loans are a necessity for this education. But what they neglect to mention is that there's the same, if not more, necessity to pay it back. That means when a doctor graduates with $250,000 of student loan debt, they're not in a position to buy a $500,000 house and a $50,000 car. If it was a necessity to take it, it's a necessity to pay it back. And that part of the discourse is completely absent. The final point that I want to make in regards to personal finance is that Islamically we're here to help others, lift them up. To try to alleviate poverty is a goal of our Sharia. And yet when we think about fundraising, when we think about the poor, we think about being stuffed in a hotel with a bad seafood dinner and someone trying to force us to give money that we don't want to give. Whereas we should consider sadaqah as a way of life, where it's part of our budget, it's part of our personal finance, that every month we set aside a certain amount that goes toward helping people, part of our charitable contribution, and we make it a goal that as we progress in our careers and our education, and we naturally increase that level of income, that we naturally also increase the output in helping others as well. But that discourse is also missing. We only want to fundraise when it comes to institution building and other things, but it's never been taught as a way of regular life, where we do it as an Islamic duty to help others. So my appeal to those listening is that we change the discourse about Islamic finance. We begin an educational process for families, for youth, for parents, how to budget, how to run a household, how to manage financial responsibilities, how to handle emergencies, how to handle these different situations that come up without having to rely on interest, as it is one of the greatest sins in our religion. No. And we also change the way that we approach these topics. We don't take it for granted that certain things are a necessity and we have to make exceptions, but we challenge the assumptions under which they make it a necessity to begin with. And then lastly is that we make it our aim that we help others and lift people up instead of creating more institutions to subdue them and put them into debt. Jazakallah khair. Wassalamu alaikum.